Hey, my name's Weston Wamp. I'm the host of Swamp Stories, a podcast presented by Issue One that dives into political reform with a bipartisan lens, exploring the problems facing our democracy and offering solutions. Here, elected officials, activists, and experts from across the political spectrum discuss issues ranging from slush funds in Congress and dark money to gerrymandering and election disinformation, and importantly, how to fix America's broken political system and build a better democracy. Find Swamp Stories wherever you get podcasts or at swampstories.org.
Skeptics is some ways a training ground for the way we could interact with the rest of the world on a daily basis. If we use those things we learn in this group outside the world, then certainly we can make the world a better place.
The Village Square, a nervy bunch of liberals and conservatives who believe that disagreement and dialogue make for a good conversation, a good country, and a good time. At the Village Square, we talk about politics, religion, and race. You know, the topics your mom taught you never to discuss in polite company. Listen, at the Village Square, we make pigs fly.
Welcome to Village SquareCast. This is Vanessa Rouse. Thanks for joining us for this unique God Squad episode where the skeptics have their say. The Skeptics are a group of politically and spiritually diverse people who've been meeting once a week for many years now. They've forged deep friendships by gathering regularly to discuss spiritual topics in a respectful manner where disagreement is both welcomed and appreciated. So listen, here's why I love this episode so very much. This is another opportunity for us to see how regular people like you and me are doing bridge building work in their own communities. And really, I hate to even call it work because quickly you're going to see how this belongs in the fun category. So lucky us, today we get to spend an hour with a few of the skeptics who share about their experiences and also give us a blueprint for doing something like this in our own lives. This program is facilitated by our very own founder and president, Liz Joyner. Liz will introduce you to the rest of the group, so time for me to turn it over to her. Here's Liz.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Joyner, founder and president of the Village Square, and we're thrilled to welcome you this afternoon to the God Squad host, The Skeptics Have Their Say. The Skeptics is a do-it-yourself lay version of God Squad, which is why we started thinking about inviting them to join us today. They're a group of politically and spiritually diverse men who've been meeting once a week for years and years in some secret location that for some reason they're not telling us where it is. Maybe we can get it out of them today. And they head right at their disagreements. They celebrate their differences, and really in many ways they've formed incredible friendships around their differences over the years. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Village Square's own Bill Mattox, both a veteran of more God Squad programs than he would care to remember, and a member of the Skeptics. Also, former NACo President and Leon County Commissioner Bryan Desloge, Matt McCreeless, and last but definitely not least, which you will find out soon enough, Fred Harris, shareholder at Greenberg Trorg. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. It's great to be a part of this.
It is great to be with all of y'all this afternoon. Bryan, I'm going to ask you the first question.
Sure.
So when and how did this group get started? And then to anyone as a follow-up, why do you call it Skeptics?
Okay. So we started, the debate is probably 20 years ago, give or take. There were four of us that had all gotten some business awards, businessmen here in town, and we had kind of a little coffee klatch group. And a couple of us said, you know, there are plenty of Bible studies in town. There are plenty of prayer groups in town. There's not a place where men can go talk about their faith in an environment that's open and respectful and a chance to, I tell people when I explain skeptics, if you're going to get your feelings hurt, this is not the place for you, because frankly, it's a little bit of hand-to-hand combat at points. And so I started meeting in my office originally, which is long since gone. And it's 7:00 on Wednesday mornings was the original. And, we have from 10 to 40 guys any given Wednesday. But the first book we used as a primer was called Letters to a Skeptic. And it was a book about a minister in his 40s. His father was in his 70s, and his father was an atheist. And it's a compilation of correspondence between the son, the minister, and the father, the atheist, saying, Dad, you're coming into the home stretch and I'm worried about your salvation. And the father would ask questions like, well, if your God is so great, why do bad things happen to good people? It's a classic questions when you start looking at religion and faith. How do you wrestle with this? So we would take a chapter a week. We would usually start with a prayer, end with a prayer. We've integrated music over the years. And it's interesting because the friendships that have evolved out of this that you would never have expected from different parts of the community. And it's broadened over the years. We've done religions of the world. We've done all sorts of different things. And today we have a very diverse group that's there. And I'll tell one story and kind of go shut up for a little while. But Rabbi Romberg was oftentimes one of our early contributors, and so we brought him in and said, Rabbi, a lot of us don't understand the Jewish faith. Could you talk to us about death, or could you talk to us about whatever? So the first time he came, and we had 15 or 20 people, and he went on for about half an hour, and, it was pretty interesting. And one of the skeptics named Steve basically said, Rabbi, this is the most self-serving, sanctimonious discussion I've ever heard. It's offensive. And I thought, oh, Jack is my friend. I invited him to come here. And he stepped right back into the fray and said, I've been baiting you guys for half an hour. How do you think the Jews have felt all of our lives, type of thing? And then off to the races. And so, and that kind of encapsulates, it's a kind of discussion you can open it up and say, and nobody feels like, we share a lot of feelings about how we come to faith and what we believe in. And over the years, it's evolved, but it's a fascinating study. And the books we've done books by atheists. We've had, and we have an atheist in the group that comes pretty regularly, who's a very intellectual guy. And he has an opinion and he's entitled to it. And we really, it's been an interesting evolution.
So the rest of you throw in just anything you all have to say about what Bryan said, including disagreeing with him.
I'll just simply say that for me, because I'm often asked this question, is why are you, as a strong, believer, why are you involved in a group called Skeptics? And I say, we want to create an environment that is skeptic friendly, that is open to anyone who, we don't make any kind of preconceived expectations of people. And in a lot of ways, I think we approach things. My background is in journalism, and I've spent a lot of time writing about education, so I'm around people in academia a lot. And in both environments, my training in journalism taught me you should always be skeptical about anything that anyone presents to you, and test and see and go and get both sides and hear from different perspectives. And I think that's also kind of something that you see a lot in the academic world. And so in that sense, I think that's a lot of what we're doing here, is we are considering ideas that are coming from a lot of different vantage points and testing them and seeing whether they hold up or whether or not they're half-baked, as some of Fred's are, right, Fred?
I'm trying to educate these people, but there are a lot of cretins involved here. Neanderthals are rampant in this group. So,
well, and I'll tell you, there's a number of people that are pretty prolific, and I think they have too much time. And there's an email chain that often erupts after some of the meetings that goes on for, I would say, hundreds of pages. I lose track trying to keep up. And if you just read the emails, oftentimes you would think that the tone is combative and divisive, and it's hilarious. And it's just friends poking at each other and saying, well, that's a ridiculous assumption because of this. And then they go off on some other rabbit trail, depending on their background and their faith. but it's the kind of discussion we should be having. If it's educational and it helps us better understand, our faith. In many cases, it strengthens where we are.
We live in a world of.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, we live in a world of far too many echo chambers, and Skeptics is not an echo chamber. And at first, it threw me off. Some of the discussion was hostile in the meetings, and I thought, wow, these guys, but it would simmer back down. Everybody would friends at the end, and once I realized that some of the passion comes from a sincere desire to share with me their personal beliefs, then I realized that the discussion that got hostile was actually not from a place of hostility, but from a place of love and concern for me and my welfare and my well-being. And I think, like Bill said, if we spend too much time not getting those calluses by testing our faith and testing our positions, then we don't strengthen ourselves. And then when that hard work comes down the road of trying to have our faith tested, then we're really in trouble because we haven't built up those calluses on our hands and our feet to protect us.
So what's the difference between so it gets kind of hot and heated sometimes, especially on the email thread. Why does that work with Skeptics and it doesn't work on Twitter?
That's a really, really good question. And I am convinced that part of it is because we are there in person and we have ongoing, enduring relationships. And in a lot of settings where you see talking heads on TV and things like that, who are engaged in strong commentary and things of that nature, there's no one there to kind of push back and to challenge them. And there's also the advantage of anonymity. People can kind of, if in Twitter, the Twitter world, there's a back and forth, it's among strangers and nobody knows really, in one sense, kind of what's behind it all. And what's great about Skeptics, I think, is that when there are those kinds of sharp exchanges, we're all in the room. We can call BS on each other, and we can also understand that someone may say something, but as Matt mentioned earlier, it's almost always coming from a good place. And at the end of it all, we remain friends. And at times our friendships are even deepened by the conflict and the clashing that takes place, within the group.
And the evolution, it's interesting because when we first started, I can tell you that it was 4 Christian guys from fairly similar backgrounds. And then we've expanded, Matt, we've got Mormon, we've got David is Jewish, Fred has the Urantia. We had a Quaker for a while. We had a little bit of everything. And, like we brought in Rabbi Romberg, which was, I thought, fascinating. And he got it real quick and he loved the back and forth banner. It's evolved and I've learned a ton. And like I said, for me personally, I'm watching some of the relationships develop and watching some of the people kind of become better educated, and it's very similar to the whole Village Square concept though, as far as, it's no hold barred on the subject. It's not personal, and you see a lot of that back and forth. It's interesting. So.
Was there ever a time when it felt like it was getting a little too, like you were skating right next to the edge?
There's a couple people that have pretty sharp edges, and there have been a couple of people. I caution everybody who I've ever invited and said, if you're going to get your feelings hurt, this is not for you. And so you need to be able to take it and understand it's not personal. And there are a few people in the room that have come at people pretty hard. And I know there are a couple of people that have rolled off over the last 20 years because they felt like I can't stand that. Which is too bad because it's an open dialogue. It's not meant to be personal. And if somebody disagrees with you, that's what makes the world go round. So in the chat, we've got Dave Micah saying we even tolerate a Catholic like Brian. Listen,
So tell me,
guys, the rest of the Christians, they're nothing without us.
So what, do you take in new members? Is it like this lifelong thing? And maybe the subtext of my question is, who let Bill Mattox in?
Yeah, someone made the mistake of inviting me right after I got to town, and I got to tell you, it's one of my favorite things in all of Tallahassee. It's something I look forward to every week because we read interesting books, we have interesting discussions, and then the friendships that have been formed out of it are very dear. It's a great group. But yeah, no, it's kind of a word of mouth, open invitation. We have people who come and go. Some people will drop out for a book because it doesn't particularly appeal to them, but they'll come back for the next one. But it's an ever-changing cast, but there are a lot of folks who've been at this for a long time, like, Brian and Fred go back, I think, all the way to the very beginning or near the beginning in Fred's case. And I've been with it 15 years now. And so there's some core members that are longstanding, but also it's open to new people. And it's always good to get kind of fresh blood that, challenges us and gives us a different perspective.
Let me say this. We've also, we've had some Buddhists and some other Hindus and whatever come and talk to us, but we would love to have some Muslims, some Sikhs, some, Hindus, Buddhists, whoever. We'd love to have all kinds of different people come and join us because we need a diversity of opinion, and that would provide that for us. So if you're out there, come visit.
Yeah. So who should they contact if they're interested? You, Fred?
Any one of us.
Any one of us, yeah.
And also, we're hearing in the chat also that Mattox is still on probation.
I'm
so you better watch out.
He hasn't gotten a tattoo yet.
Okay, so tell me about the elephant in the room. Why is it all men? And is there something that comes of that that's important?
I mean, we've talked about this a number of times, and I think a lot of us clearly men and women are going to see the world completely different. And there's a certain amount of fellowship and camaraderie and among the men that makes it work. I don't know, Bill or Fred or Matt, you guys want to jump in, but it wasn't meant to be exclusive. It just rolled that way, and that's the way we kind of kept it. So I guess one thing I'll say here is that I think that there is this kind of romantic notion that I see, particularly on the political left, that says, wouldn't it be great if all of us from various backgrounds, ethnicities, gender, income, on down, on and on, if we all kind of gathered and came together around a certain set of ideas. And I have to say that I share that longing and yearning in the sense that, I'm part of a faith tradition that speaks about how in the next life, people from every tongue and every tribe will worship Jesus Christ. And so I understand that longing, but I also recognize that on this side of heaven, it's important for us to have gatherings where there's strong disagreement and where we can challenge one another. And this group provides that. And in many ways, when people look at us and say, gosh, there isn't a lot of diversity here, I kind of scratch my head and say, what do you mean? Where else do you find people from such wildly different spiritual backgrounds gathering to talk about some of the most important questions in life?
And political backgrounds too, right? Different
political backgrounds and all the rest. And so, yes, do we share some things in common? Sure. We're all of the same general age group. Yes, we're all male, but there's very stark difference. And so I guess what that says to me is diversity comes in different forms. We often think of it in terms of race, ethnicity, sex, whatnot, but viewpoint diversity is, in my mind, extremely important in this life for us to get to the truth of things. And so this is a group that is full of viewpoint diversity.
Anyone else on the all men question?
Matt,
if you don't answer, you're gonna have to hear my story about how I've been to Skeptics. It's practically on my resume. And it was, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. Has it been that long? But I was really there essentially to drive John Haidt when he was coming to visit the Village Square the next morning, he joins the Skeptics. And so I was really his wheels. And then I also brought books. So, but I enjoyed it. I felt welcome.
It was timely. I think we actually were doing his book and it just, you at the same time. Yeah, which was perfect. And we've had over the last 20 years in between books, a lot of times we'll have various speakers, like we had Bob Williamson, who used to own Honey Lake, who, wrote the book Miracle on Lucky Street. And, and occasionally, people like him come. I remember that my conference room over on Miccosukee we must have had 40 or 50 people that morning. Just a lot of people were interested in his story. Rabbi Romberg was a pretty regular kind of attendee. And we've had interesting
we had Pato Bantan, who's a reggae star, who was visiting. He came and hung out with us one morning after playing.
Did he sing?
No, he was in town for a concert, but he was staying at my house, so I asked him to come with us, and he gave his little spiel about why he is a Urantia book reader. So there you go. We have a lot of different speakers. But also we take, everybody chips in to see what book we read. We always have these book debates on what we're going to read next, and we've just gotten done reading probably one of the better books we've done, which was Night by Elie Wiesel. Not sure if I pronounced his name right, but really great discussions came out of that book. It's a Holocaust book, but yeah. Some of the questions we ask ourselves, could we do the same thing in circumstances similar,
So there are a couple sort of related good questions in the chat thread already. And one is, aren't there ways that being all men creates an echo chamber? And if so, in what way? Like, what do you think a visiting female or two might have to add to the conversation? And then second one is just if you're basically all Christian, which I think you are not, but more you tilt that way, what are you being skeptical about?
One of the things that I think is the biggest question is all the religions seem to think that it's my way or the highway. And that's not my perspective. I don't think that's Matt's perspective, but certainly some religions believe that if you're not with us, you're, going to hell, etc. And that's something that we talk about a lot. And so my view is there's many paths to God as there are people to walk them. So no one path is going to be the exclusive way.
Well, I was going to say we all in the Christian sect, we all worship the same God. The issue is all these man-made rules underneath, whether that's Catholic or Methodist or Protestant. So, we argue all the time about the nuances, but at the end of the day, I think we're really on the Christian side. Now, it varies as you go further out, but it's been interesting.
In other words, there are people there who really just don't agree with you at all.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too, is there are a lot of folks that I would say are nominally something. They were raised in a particular faith tradition, but they didn't particularly embrace it or haven't really carefully thought about it. And so a lot of times you get, as the conversations unfold, a lot of interesting disagreement. And there'll be times even when, people will be sharing a perspective that isn't in line with what their original tradition taught or something. So there's a great deal of diversity. There's no question that if there were women involved, that there would be perspectives not represented just because women see the world differently. There's also there would be certain things that are said or that are discussed, or certain language that's used in an all-male setting that probably would not happen in a female if females were present. So there's something constructive, I think, about having. We can be a lot more direct, a lot more straightforward, I think, as men just interacting with other men than we would be if women were there. We would probably be better behaved in some respects, but we might not be quite as honest or authentic.
Does that have anything to do with the multiple testaments?
All right. Stop.
Okay.
Stop before you get me in trouble.
Okay, he's already gotten you in trouble.
No, this is a conversation that will not be explored further.
So have you all ever heard of in the Village Square, that would appear to be a can of worms. At the Village Square, one of our heroes is Robert Putnam, who wrote the book Bowling Alone, like in the 1990s, I think, or early 2000s, and sort of identified part of our problem with social capital and social cohesion back then. But he talks about two different kinds of capital: bonding social capital and bridging social capital. And obviously the Village Square is in the business of bridging social capital. We want to have people to spend time with people who aren't like them. And it's a really important part of what we do. But it's not that bonding social capital doesn't have an important role in society, right? I mean, and again, you guys are bridging and bonding in different ways, but I think sometimes we kind of lose that we've got both of them are really important parts of what we have to build around us. We have to be able to hang out with people who are a lot like us and be able to hang out with people who aren't like us at all.
It's oftentimes too, when we start, we'll try and open with a prayer, finish with a prayer, but oftentimes whoever's leading the group, we pass the responsibility around, gets immediately sidetracked by whatever the news du jour is. There'll have been some critical news issue, and we all even see that completely different. And then we're off to the races about how that applies in our lives. And, we try and keep dragging it back to more of a spiritual discussion, but too often it ends up being some kind of, political discussion or news of the day. It's interesting. So
it could be you're one of the longest running actual conversations between people who don't agree on all these issues. It's not happening too much. And then in the thread, apparently Sally Bradshaw of Midtown Reader has been to Skeptics, and she has no wallflower. So apparently you let her speak. So I have a bone to pick with all of you now.
Actually, remember we had a member who passed away, and his wife was still on the email chain, and she showed up because the topic interested her. And I don't think she quite realized that it was 15, 20 men in the room, and we welcomed her, and she came once or twice, but I think she quickly decided this wasn't something she wanted. But whatever the topic was, she said, well, I really wanted to hear this particular speaker or topic. But it was nice to have her, so.
That's pretty cool. So what is your favorite part of Skeptics?
I mean, I'd say the relationships over the 20 years that have evolved. I think you've got a pretty disparate group of men that oftentimes socially don't interact in any other way. I mean, I'm looking around the room here. Bill, you and I have become better friends. I didn't know Matt very well until he joined the group. And I could look around the room as far as the Skeptics group go, and you've got all these touch points for people that generally wouldn't in their normal lives see each other, know each other, and you've developed all these friendships, in a lot of cases pretty strong friendships, because you can have those kind of discussions. It's a lot better than just some surfacey neighbor that you wave to every so often type of thing, because a little bit about them, you understand what makes them tick. And like Village Square, for a long time we had breakfast. Now it's kind of everybody shows up with their own coffee, but it works.
Yeah, and I'll say that I think one of the best things that I've liked about it is that I have stereotypes that I've been fed about certain people or certain groups challenged in this, and I have to go and test and see, whoa, this doesn't really hold true, or at least isn't true of this particular person that I know from that faith tradition or whatnot. And then I have ideas that I have dismissed at times challenged. I remember we did this fascinating study of something called the Theology of the Body, which is a long collection of essays that Pope John Paul II wrote. I'm not a Catholic, and there's a lot about the Catholic view of human sexuality that I expected to find issue with, and I certainly didn't agree with everything. But I remember, for example, that at the very end of it, we had a priest who came to kind of summarize and wrap up our discussion. And he did this long presentation on why he believes in celibacy and, for the priesthood and what it represents and how it foreshadows life in heaven and all this sort of stuff. And I realized afterwards that, celibacy is not something that I ever hope to practice in this life, as a married man, but there's a lot of legitimacy to the arguments that were being made, or at least some ideas that were being presented that were fresh and new that I had never heard before, and don't know that I would have heard had it not been for a setting like this.
But I'd like to make a note that it was 29 minutes into the meeting before Bill had some comment about just saying.
Right. I'm sorry. I knew I was about to get in trouble there. So
is that longer than usual?
No, it's
never.
Not. It's a few minutes, and he brings it back to some kind of thus back to the why is it all men type of thing. Yeah, it's a little bit of
So how about other stretch experiences that anyone has had that you're willing to share?
I don't know. I mean, we certainly have an awful lot of differences of opinions, and sometimes people just agree to disagree. I mean, there's one person in the room who's pretty pointed in their comments, and that's okay. I mean, he's pretty openly. He holds his line pretty hard. There's no give on his point. Which I can appreciate, but it doesn't mean it has to be my, I'm not dying on the hill for every one of his points. And we move past it. Some people can't. And there have been a few people that said, I can't operate in that kind of environment. I think it's weak, in my opinion. I think, everybody's entitled to their opinion. So, but like we're prone to say at Village Square, you're not entitled to your own facts. And in faith, facts are debatable because, look at all the different versions of what people believe in. So.
One of the people in the chat room asked a question that kind of builds on yours, Liz, that I think might help to respond to yours. And that is, the question is, can you give us examples of disagreements that you commonly have or that we might better understand rather than disagreements among yourselves rather than among those with guests that might come in like Rabbi Rumberg did that day. And I think a recurring theme for some of the disagreements that we would have would be on kind of conceptions of God. There's a kind of Santa Claus conception of God. There is a kind of schoolmaster conception of God. There is a father conception of God. And so we're often pushing back and forth on some of that. And I think part of what we really enjoyed about this most recent book about the Holocaust was that it kind of disabused anyone of a Santa Claus view of God, because that clearly didn't square with the experiences of these people. But we're constantly wrestling with this question of works and grace, and whether or not we are loved like a father in spite of ourselves, or whether we are seeking to win the approval of a schoolmaster who we hope will give us a passing grade so that we can make it to the next life. And I'd say, at least when I think about some of the push back and forth that I have with Fred, perhaps it often it is over questions like that. Is God a father who loves us in spite of ourselves, or is he a schoolmaster who's hoping or expecting us to get a passing grade based on our works?
There you go, misrepresenting my position again.
I was just wanting to get a rise out of you.
Yeah. So, I don't take the position that God is some sort of, accountant making sure that we get everything in the right place. But I am of the position that while God is a father, we're here on this planet to learn how to be better spiritual beings and to advance spiritually and let go of some of the material stuff. So we are here, in my opinion, and I think Matt can join in here because I think the Mormons are the same way. This is a school. We're in an educational process, and we're going to have a lot of problems. That's why one of my main things is it's always something. It's always something you got to deal with. So, Matt, tell us a little bit about, the Mormon perspective of this.
Well, we similar to Fred. I mean, we believe in an all-loving God. We're all His children, and so therefore He loves us as a father would, in a perfect way, even that we can't even comprehend as fathers ourselves. But along with that, we do believe that there is a learning process in this life. We are learning to become more like Him, or more like His Son, Jesus Christ. And so that encompasses everything that we strive to do in this life. and we fail, we fall, we come short, and we pick ourselves up and do again. We learn from the lessons of failures and try to improve on our everyday lives and make the world better as we go throughout this life.
Now, Matt, the Mormons, one thing I really admire about the Mormon religion is that you guys are all about service. And you and I have worked a couple times on, but when the hurricanes came, we pulled out our chainsaws and we've done some ramp builds and stuff. So tell us a little bit about how you guys prioritize the service aspect.
So Liz mentioned the bond or the bridge, and the bond comes probably from the community of your faith. The bridge, I think, is enhanced by service. Fred and I, or anybody that you serve with, any different, any philosophies or differences of opinion that you may have, when you have a common goal to help your fellow man or woman, service bridges that gap and makes any differences of opinions immaterial because of the goal of trying to help somebody else. And I really like the concept of service. I've had some friends that I disagree with dramatically on things, and some that caused me to be very upset. And well, they didn't cause me. I chose to be upset. But I was very disappointed in some of the opinions. Anyway, when you serve with those people, all that stuff goes right out the window because you're doing something for your fellow man. And in my opinion, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints' philosophy, you are practicing becoming more like Jesus in that activity. And because you're doing that and you have a common goal, that the mutual, shoulder to shoulder effort bridges whatever gaps there are in differences of opinions.
We also, Matt had some of the members of his church come in and talk about the temple that's being built. I thought it was fascinating. I had a lot of questions about what does that look like? How's it going to be finished? How's it going to be run? And that was pretty interesting in the grand scheme of things. So
I'll simply add one other point of difference. It's a recurring theme is over the question of free will versus God's sovereignty, and to what extent man is responsible for decisions and choices that he makes, and to what extent, just kind of how do those two concepts come into play? That's a recurring theme about which there are strong disagreements from all sides.
So one question from the thread is, over the years, have you experienced and discussed the growth of a more nationalistic faith? Is that good, bad, or both?
I don't know that has been a theme that we have dealt with. We try. I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable to kind of steer clear of political conversations or at least topics that are politically driven. We try as much as possible to keep things on a kind of religious, spiritual plane rather than to delve deeply into politics. So nationalism strikes me as being a kind of more of a political topic than a spiritual one. So I don't know that that's one that we've explored greatly.
What we have talked about, though, Bill, is that, I'm strongly opposed to religion getting involved in politics. We talked about how certain religious groups are affiliated with certain political parties. Now that's really dividing people, which I think is inconsistent with what we should be doing, which is bridging all gaps. And so, yeah, I think politics and religion is a problem. And we talk about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. So y'all won't be surprised that Dave is trolling y'all in the chat here and there. But so I have a very important question. Tell us about the Fred song.
All right. So I guess let me kind of take the start of here. They let me bring my guitar and play a song every week. And what happens is we have certain topics that I know what chapter we're reading in the books and that sort of thing. And I'll try and find a song that is appropriate. And over the years, I'll give you a couple examples. Most religions believe that the Savior is coming. It could be Jesus, it could be Maitreya, it could be the Messiah or whatever. But everybody thinks there's going to be some extracelestial or extraterrestrial person come down to save him. So I played Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. We also talk about sometimes about how, wars and that sort of thing. So I played Your Flag Decal Won't Get You Into Heaven Anymore by John Prine, and With God on Our Side by Bob Dylan. Sometimes we have some Gators in here. And so one time I played Won't Back Down by Tom Petty, because that's Florida's using that song in their football games now. And I changed the lyrics of certain songs, because this is one way I get my point of view across. Most people don't know lyrics anyway, so I just add stuff. In fact, Brian came up to me one time and said, I didn't know that song said that. And I go, no, I made that part up.
I've been humming this song all my life, and I thought, well, I didn't know that.
So last week, I changed some lyrics to a Bob Dylan song, and Bill chastised me saying, how can you change words from a guy who's the number one poet in this country? But I'll just give you an example. This was I Shall Be Released. I know if you know this song. I added an ending verse to it that said, a broken man is on his knees, all his visions crashed and burned. It's only then he opens up his heart, and finally to God he turns. So that's what I added to I Shall Be Released. But some of them are more specific to my point of view. So that's the Fred song.
So, and you guys sing?
That would be a stretch.
Yeah, we will humor Fred and mumble along as he leads the singing. And there are a couple of guys who have really good voices that will sing. But I have to say, when I first started coming to this group, I really thought this song thing was just kind of weird, and I didn't quite understand it. But it quickly won me. Fred quickly won me over. And it is now one of the things that I most look forward to, because it's always kind of a source of amusement and sometimes of reflection, because Fred takes a lot of care in choosing which song he sings that relates to our theme. And it just makes it all kind of lighthearted and enjoyable.
It's a little reverent most days, too.
And lucky us, he's chosen one for today.
So I've done one that is consistent with, I've sung this before, but I've done this song by Sean Mullins, We All Give God the Blues. So I'm just going to do it real quick for you here. God don't hate the Muslims, and God don't hate the Jews, and God don't hate the Christians, but we all give God the blues. And God don't hate the atheists, the Buddhists, or the Hindus, because God loves everybody, but we all give God the blues. And God ain't no Republican, God's ain't no Democrat, God ain't an independent, God's above all of that. He's bigger than religion, got a better plan. The sign says God's gone fishing for the soul of every man. And God don't hate the Muslims, and God don't hate the Jews, and God don't hate the Christians, but we all give God the blues. Yeah, we all give God the blues.
All right.
And a little bit of an abbreviated verse, but in any event, that's what we do for Fred's song.
We probably do give God the blues. Something we probably succeed at. So before I forget to ask this, because I really do want to ask it, do you have recommendations for anyone listening who's thinking about starting a group like this?
So if they're in the Tallahassee area, we'd certainly welcome them coming and, taking part with us and learning from us and doing a spinoff. We've had a young group a young guy that considered that at one point. And then I should also say that I am going to be doing a couple of book clubs this summer in conjunction with the Village Square that will be Skeptics-like in some respects. One is around John Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. and would welcome folks who are interested in taking part in that. And you can sign up through the Village Square, and we'll provide information for you from there.
Yeah, and actually, we'll if I can just add, if you can go ahead and email me, liz@villagesquare.us, if you're interested, and I'll get you connected.
No.
And we, it's same time, same place. We generally try and open with a prayer, end with a prayer. We honor the time, so if we used to start 7, we moved back to 7:30 with COVID. And so it's 7:30 to 8:30. And some people stick around for half an hour, 40 minutes and chit chat afterwards. And some people come late and some people leave early. It's pretty fluid like that, but we try and open at the time, close at the time. And it's usually a topic most of us should have, somebody blasts out an email and says, in fact, Dave does that now and says, hey, here's what we're reading. Here's who's got the chapter. And we go from there. And the discussion pings all over the place, and it takes usually just a few minutes before somebody loses complete control. But it's an interesting discussion among a disparate group of people. It works. It works.
One thing I'd say, if somebody wants to start their own group, is they have to be thick-skinned. All right.
Yeah.
You can't have people be too sensitive to debate. If your truth is not susceptible to skeptical debate, then you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this at all.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had some pretty good debates too.
So how do you think the world would be different if we could somehow wave a magic wand and in our hometown, there were 100 skeptics groups that were all diverse in different ways? Would everything be different?
I'll pipe in from a political perspective. Frankly, it's awful watching what goes on in the political spectrum, because there's such a lack of respect and a lack of pure facts. And it's just a mudslinging match too often. And people aren't willing to have a discussion about their differences. And oftentimes we're not that far apart. I mean, you start way out on either side because you let the left and the right drive the discussion. It's what's lost in American politics today, though, I think. And it's unfortunate because it slows the whole process down, and we end up with a jumbled mess as opposed to some kind of cohesive, let's move the communities forward. So none of us expect to walk away and have completely changed our religious affiliation. But I like Fred mentioned earlier, I got a lot of respect for the Mormons, and I've learned a lot from Matt being in there. I'm a huge fan of what they do, and I would have never had that had I not, had the Skeptics experience. So,
so actually, you, Bryan, are really your relationships are one of the original inspirations behind the Village Square, and you talk about your big Catholic family. Talk about that.
Well, I used this when I was in the county too. I said, I came in this chair and I gave a little speech, and I said, look, I came from a big raucous Catholic family. Fight to the bone type of thing. It was a wide open brawl. And I said, my expectation is you have that type of discussion about the issues, but the minute it turns personal, we stop. And I gavelled a few meetings shut, because what happened was the discussion went from a full-on hard charging discussion about whatever people's different opinions were to taking shots at each other, which is unfortunate in today's politics because everybody wants to make it personal. No, we all come to the world from a different place, and we all have a different lens that we see things. And that doesn't make one person right or wrong or good or bad. It just means that's the way we see it. And until you have the ability to sit down and talk about it in a civil tone about the facts, like in Village Square, you lose that. And I just remember growing up, we fought like cats and dogs. You sit down at dinner and you have there's quick prayer and you have dinner, and that was the way we operated. They're my brothers and my sisters. I love them, but there are points at which it's bothersome for me, at least, watching what's going on in the political world today. And I think Village Square could answer a lot of those questions if we could overlay that onto a lot of what's going on.
And Bill, one thing I'd say, because Liz wanted to know if there were a bunch of these all around the community, why it would be beneficial. The thing that we build is community and relationship, and that is critical to a society, really. We need to have a relationship with other people, even if they're on different sides of an issue. And I think that's one thing that Skeptics would provide.
And I think that's the key to success, is the fact that part of the reason why our conversations, I think, tend to be focused on the issue or the topic or the idea and not a personal attack is because underlying it, we are friends. We've developed friendships. We've developed relationships. And even though we may not agree with someone at all, we nevertheless love and respect the people that we're engaged in this conversation with. And that helps to separate the ideas from the individuals. And that's, I think, really important and something that we don't see happening in a lot of political combat, where it's just lobbing grenades at people and thinking the worst of each other and engaging really with strangers, not with friends.
Yeah, and Fred pointed out earlier, if you don't have thick skin, I mean, everybody's jealous of the fact that I'm Catholic and they like to take shots at me periodically.
Well, I was telling Matt when we were bantering back and forth that one of my very closest friends from this work, and even my husband refers to him as my work husband, is Latter-day Saints. He's in Utah, and I completely adore him. Our politics are completely different. One time we ticked through all the sort of generally the things that divide us. We felt completely different on all those issues. And our religions are different. And still, he is one of the most important people in my life. And actually, after the January 6th event, he called me on the phone and he said he just wanted to talk to me. And only call I got. And so, those relationships really do change everything. I can't hate people who disagree with me because of Jacob.
And let me mention that in my perspective, relationships have a divine purpose, and that you will know these people after this work. So, relationships have more value than property, because property you can't take with you, but we will know each other going forward, in my perspective.
So I'm going to throw a question from the audience, another question. One of the critiques of Christians is that we spend a lot of time with people like us who believe what we believe. It's great that within this group, you all are going beyond that, but can you talk about how you take it outside of the group? How do these discussions shape your daily life and interactions with the world around you?
Matt, what about you, buddy?
Well, I really think the way this is most effective is if we share those things that we learn in this class that help us, or not the class, but the group. If we share those things that we learn there on how to bridge those gaps, friend those that don't have maybe common philosophies, serve with them, learn from them. If we use those things that we learn in this group outside the world, then certainly we can make the world a better place in our everyday lives outside of Skeptics. Skeptics is some ways a training ground for the way we could interact with the rest of the world on a daily basis. All of our other interactions should be of a similar type. If we have people that we disagree with, then hopefully we're able to have open dialogue with those individuals. Sometimes that's not possible because an individual may not be open to that, but to the extent that you can, the things that we are able to learn how to do in Skeptics, be disagreeable in a manner that is still friendly, and in an effort to help each other and in an effort to, strengthen each other. Those kind of things can only help us in our everyday lives, in our interactions with other people throughout the world.
I might mention that Skeptics have gone outside of the group to assist other people. We've built a couple ramps. Like I said, we did the hurricane thing. So we've been taking on service projects, which also get us into the community with other people as well. So,
yeah, and having a difference of opinion doesn't mean you don't like the other person. It just means I got a lot of respect for the guys in the room, and frankly, I've learned to understand. All right, now I understand why they think the way they do, or they see the world the way they do, or they believe in what they believe in. I don't have to follow that belief, but I have a whole lot of respect for how they got there. And too often, I think in today's society, we immediately discount somebody who's not like us. And we assume, well, then they're bad. Well, that's just a crazy assumption. So, it's broken down a lot of barriers, and it's been a chance for us to, really have some open and honest discussions. Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, I had a very distorted view of the Mormons prior to Matt being in the group. And frankly, I'm a big fan of all the things they do. As Fred pointed out, the service they do, it's commendable. So,
yeah.
One of you mentioned, this is a question from the audience. One of you mentioned that a difficult conversation has sometimes helped to deepen a friendship in the group. Can you expand on that?
Well, this most recent book that we've been dealing with the Holocaust, raises all sorts of really challenging questions about the problem of evil and why horrible things happen in this life and all the rest. And the book begins with a couple of folks who go back to warn one who comes back to warn the Jewish community of things that he has seen because he had escaped one of the concentration camps, and he comes back to try to warn them. And then later, when they are on a train headed to Auschwitz, there's a woman who kind of prophesies and sees into the future and starts screaming and wailing and is talking of fire and brimstone and all the rest. And these are really sobering sorts of moments. And one of the guys in our group is someone who often is like that woman on the train and will say things that we don't like to hear. And there's a tendency on the part of some of us to want to tie him up and gag him, much like they tied up and gagged that woman on the train. But but one of the things that we had to confront was maybe this is someone that we should be listening to because he has seen something or he has insight that we need to hear and that we ought to consider. And so, I think sometimes these challenging topics and challenging conversations help us to appreciate why someone who may seem like they're your worst enemy could in fact be your best friend who's trying to warn you of something or to tell you something that you need to know. Because the questions that we're dealing with are not just, happy, light, trivial questions. We're dealing with the ultimate questions of life and of meaning and of purpose and why we're here and where we're going. And so it's important for us to wrestle with these things and to do so in a safe environment where we can, consider different perspectives and be challenged.
Anyone else?
I was going to say that Fred and I are probably lightning rods from time to time, and I have never felt it come from a place of anything other than a place of love. At first, I took exception to this particular person that probably Bill was talking about, and once I realized that the place that he was coming from was a place of love, and that he was concerned for my welfare, and I understood that, it changed my entire outlook.
Oh, we lost Matt, but hopefully he'll come back. So any closing thoughts before we say goodbye to you for the weekend?
We'd welcome anybody else that's got an interest in coming by and visiting. It's a pretty welcoming group, and love to have you. Just call one of us and we'll tell you how. When it's Wednesday morning, 7:30, just reach out to one of us here.
Or reach out to Liz, and Liz can connect us.
Sure.
Matt and Fred, parting wisdom.
It's all good. It's all going to work out. Don't worry about it.
Fred, by the way, Dave says the song thing is very weird, but we always look forward to being tolerant of Fred.
We love Fred. We love his music.
Matt?
We just need to disabuse him of all of his strange ideas. That's all.
Said from a position of love.
Matt, any closing thoughts other than?
I just enjoy Skeptics. It's taught me a lot about just dealing with people and what the best way to move forward is, and in this life, and all the differences that we might have with individuals, and how best to proceed. And I think Skeptics is a good learning ground for all of us to know how to move forward.
Thank you so much to all of you for making us a little part of the Skeptics for this 1 hour. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We've been at this for a long time, and it wouldn't be the same without you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, gods.
Bye.
Hey there, it's Vanessa back with you. Here I am once again, surprised by how much I personally needed this program. And why do I keep being surprised? That's a whole other topic. Anyway, if you're not quite ready to say goodbye to these guys, you're in luck. We have a fun closing for this show. We give Fred the last word, or really, I should say the last note. So stick around with us for just a couple more minutes for that. I am so thankful to these guys for showing us the way and demonstrating through their own experiences why it's so important to have spaces in our lives where we can explore these topics outside of our own echo chambers. And just like our recent episode with Alex Workman, who shows us how to break down divisions through coffee dates, this is another model that uses our best advice. Gather in person, across differences, in a fun social setting, and use relationships as the foundation for making disagreements okay. I'm now on board with the idea that if we had lots and lots of skeptics groups of all types, near and far, this world would be a better place. Now, before I let you go, I want to share one thing that's been on my mind. When Bill spoke about diversity, specifically about some people saying their group doesn't have much diversity, he made the point that diversity comes in different forms, and he talked about the importance of viewpoint diversity. Well, the concept of diversity has been on my mind a lot lately, and I think Bill makes an excellent point. I think our expectations of diversity have become so appearance-based. It's like if you can see the diversity of a group from looking at a picture, you've checked all the boxes, so you're good. Ding, 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 success. We've come to a point where we think we can categorize people by looking at them. Like you have black or brown skin, or you look like you might be gay. You must be a Democrat. On the other hand, you're a Christian or you're a hunter. You must be a Republican. But wait, this voids out all the people who don't fit neatly into those boxes, who don't feel like they fully identify with the other people in their box. So here's some questions I've been pondering. Isn't a broad goal of diversity movements to make everyone feel like they belong? And is it possible that by not allowing for complexity of thought and for crisscrossy categorizations, we're doing the very thing we're trying to combat? As I've been thinking about this over the last few weeks, I heard a guy speak about his own experience. This guy has Jewish roots, and he lost a good bit of his family in the Holocaust. He talked about how it feels to be dismissed because he's a white male, because he's part of a group of white males who are often talked about as the oppressors. It's like his personal experience isn't valuable and people don't want to hear his viewpoints. But you only have to peel back one layer to realize it's not that simple. And this all just makes me wonder, who is the judge anyway? Why have we allowed a common narrative to make this guy feel like his personal opinions and experiences don't have a place in our public square? Lots to consider here, and I'm just so thankful to these guys for being willing to share about their experiences and for doing the work in the first place. Here's Fred to bring it home with a song picked especially for us.
So this is, because this is Village Square, this is from the Village people. Young man, there's no need to feel down. I said, young man, pick yourself off the ground. I said, young man, cause you're in a new town. There's no need to be unhappy, young man. There's a place you can go. I said, young man, when you're short on your dough, you can stay there. And I'm sure you will find many ways to have a good time. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun have a good meal. You can do whatever you feel. Young man, are you listening to me? I said, young man, what do you want to be? I said, young man, you can make real your dream.
All right.
There you go, folks.
Thank you, Fred. That was wonderful.
Let's hear it for Fred, spreading around joy with his awesome song tradition. All right, if you eat this stuff up like I do, make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter so you're in the loop on everything happening at the Village Square. You can sign up at villagesquare.us and subscribe to Village SquareCast wherever you listen to podcasts. And please leave us a review. They really do help. We appreciate you listening to this God Squad episode, The Skeptics Have Their Say. Until next time, we challenge you to reach out with an open heart and mind to someone who doesn't look or think like you. It changes everything. We'll talk to you soon, and thanks so much for listening to Village SquareCast.